Given, thanks for the coffee, man. It was good seeing you. So I thought we'd have this discussion because I'm getting all these questions about Airbnbs, in particularly Cape Town, and a lot of the other cities that we operate from are getting these concerns and complaints about Airbnbs, and so it really has changed the landscape of short-term rentals and so on. And I thought, maybe you and I can have a cup of coffee over this.
Funny you should mention that. I was actually inquiring or wanting to know about Airbnbs in particular and how the impact of short-term rentals industry has on section title owners.
So we have many of our schemes obviously there are a lot of people investing in these schemes, not necessarily to live there, but as an investment. Property is always safe as houses. You've heard that saying, and people want to invest in short-term letting as well. Have their properties rented out. But the problem comes in is the very short-term letting, where we have Airbnbs, for instance. Now, you and I may usually just go on an app, search for a property, book it through an application. There are several to choose from.
Yes.
But that's not where it stops, is that you actually have to get access to the property and then stay at the property and so on. So on. So the problem comes in is where people have very short-term letting like Airbnbs that actually utilize the properties. Is that it has an impact on the security of the scheme, for instance, and then we have to pray that the people actually using the short-term units that they actually adhere to the rules of the scheme.
Okay. So I'm aware that there are new regulations being proposed. How do you think the proposed regulations plan to integrate into the broader industry? Tourism industry. That's my question.
So I think it's necessary, but that's looking from an owner letting out a property, and the regulations involving that. Whereas we, as managing agents, have to deal with the actual management side of things. We've had incidents where people utilizing short-term rentals, especially Airbnbs, where they don't listen and they don't adhere to the rules. We've had people having parties past what the rules say. So then we have to try and regulate from the managing agent side the actual use of the apartment, of the property, and still trying to accommodate the owner having the investment property. So it is a bit of a balance that we have to focus on and try to manage as managing agents the best as we can.
Okay. So in the proposal or in the proposed regulations, it makes mention on limiting the number of days a property can be rented out. How do you think that proposal is going to affect the short-term rentals market in South Africa?
I think it may very well assist. However, as managing agents, we would always propose changing the conduct rules according to the needs of that particular scheme. Because as soon as you've got the rules providing guidance in terms of what the procedures are, when somebody lets out a property as an Airbnb, then at least there's a way to ensure that there's harmony in that scheme. Because the biggest frustration is when people abuse the property
Yes.
the common areas that don't adhere to the scheme rules. And then the expectation is that the security guard that's doing access control now suddenly has to leave his post and try and enforce the conduct rules of the scheme. And that's not really their purpose.
Yeah.
So if you've got the conduct rules in place, giving direction on how Airbnbs should be administered in a scheme, then at least the fight is halfway won.
Okay. And then in terms of the proposed regulations, I do note that it's supposed to provide relief to the trustees and directors of sectional title schemes. How do you think it's going to do that?
Yes, so remember, a law and a rule is great and regulation is great, but then it needs to be enforced. And the way to enforce it is by means of ensuring that the rules particular to that scheme is enforced. Because, when you have the rules of a scheme, for instance, it actually drills down to the nitty-gritties. Let me use an example, Given. Like the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Not every scheme's got a swimming pool.
Exactly.
You understand? So now the regulations gives you a global rule, but when it comes down to a specific scheme, then you have to put it in the rules of that scheme. What times do the people using the swimming pool, for instance, by what times are they allowed to do so? The ages of people. Can you use the swimming pool if you're under 16 years old, unless you accommodate accompanied by an adult, for instance? So those are the things that you have to drill down, and that's what you have in the rules, and non-adherence to the rules. And unfortunately, there must possibly be provision for fines or penalties, which are then again is enforced by the CSOS.
Okay, now I hear you, Arthur. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, what do you think the proposed regulations will have on the sense of community in the scheme and overall quality of life in a complex?
I think that will just add to the ammunition. That will just add to how to enforce the rules. So regulations is great. So at least there some adherence to that, because at the moment it's a bit of a free for all. So now you've got regulations regulating Airbnb, which is great. But still, as a managing agent, we want to look after our clients, our specific clients, the day-to-day people using their apartments where they go home after a long day's work. They want to live in peace, and they don't want to necessarily have to deal with people not adhering to the rules. And that's where we come in, by recommending, giving advice, suggesting, and advising our clients in the best way to regulate Airbnbs and so on. That's where we come in.
And that's our aim as manager agent.
That's right.
I think then my parting question would be then, how do you think the proposed regulations in terms of short-term rentals will impact community schemes, or let's rather say areas that heavily rely on this rental model?
Yes. So ideally, if you had to ask me, Arthur, what is your one wish? In terms of the regulations, I would ideally like a platform. Because very often it's a person renting out his or her apartment via an app, somebody books, but we as managing agents don't even know the parties they're involved. So now suddenly, if there's a platform that the regulator has prescribed, so you have to go through that process to before you can rent out your property. That may be a way to ensure compliance and make more people happy.
Okay.
with the process.
No, I appreciate this conversation.
Sure.
Gave me some bit of insight, and I'll take it with me. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Good seeing you.